In your packets, you have something called the Motivation Assessment Scale 2. This is another way to do a functional assessment. Again, this is something that we designed, but it's not the only thing we do. Okay, we don't just rely on one form of assessment to do a functional assessment. We use multiple forms of assessment. One thing, though, is just as a warning, we discourage people from relying on the most common way that people do this. The most common way people do this is called clinical intuition, otherwise known as guessing. So you're in a meeting and someone goes, well, I've been in the field for 55 years and I've never seen this child, but from my observations of your discussion, it's occurring for this reason. Everybody takes notes and writes that down. Do you remember the 4 categories? Attention, escape, tangible, sensory. We did a study once where we asked people to guess. Which of those 4 do you think is going on? No formal assessment, just guess. People were correct, and this is people who knew the individual, people were correct about 25% of the time. Now, if you know about statistics, it might be a while since you've been in a statistics class, but you know about statistics, a chimpanzee could be right 25% of the time because that's chance. You have to pick one, you're going to be right 25% of the time. So guessing is okay. You can guess as a start to give you some ideas, but you better not just be guessing. Okay? Because if you're just guessing, you're going to be wrong a lot. What's wrong with being wrong a lot? If you're wrong a lot, you're beginning an intervention process that takes a lot of people's time, a lot of effort, and you're going to be wrong. So you want to do as much as you can up front to try to get the answers. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be right 100% of the time, no matter how many assessments you do, but you're going to be right more often if you take a little bit more time. So we use ABC charts. We use observations. We use the Motivation Assessment Scale. We try to see, do they give us the same information? Do they converge on each other? If we come up with the same information using multiple assessments, then we have a pretty good idea. So think about if you have somebody that you want to design an intervention for, you have a behavior. Now, why just one behavior? One behavior because, well, let me ask you this. Could you fill out this scale on a tantrum? Why not? A lot of behaviors can make up a tantrum. Okay? For example, we had a kid who his teacher said, we're working on her tantrums and we've done different interventions and they work a little bit, but sometimes they don't work well. Well, the tantrum included hand biting, screaming, falling on the floor, and running around the room. When we did separate assessments on those behaviors, we found out that she bit her hand and fell on the floor to escape work, and she screamed and ran around the room to get attention. So that tantrum, all of those together, actually were 2 separate functions. When we separated them out, we found out that she was doing different things. So what you want to try to do is separate them out into something like a hand bite, like a scream, like hitting somebody. One of the best examples, we get this a lot in New York City when we do assessments, is having an attitude. He has an attitude. Okay, you can't fill out the scale on having an attitude. What do you mean by that? Well, when I ask him to do something, he does this. And I know this, having a 16-year-old son, I know exactly what they're talking about. But I'll say, okay, what we're going to do is fill this out for eye rolling and sign. Well, it's not just that. Sometimes he takes the table and flips it over. Separate one out for flipping over tables. Well, sometimes he curses. Separate one for cursing. Why separate behaviors, separate assessments? Because they may be occurring for different reasons. Okay, so that's important. The other thing to notice is you're going to pick a specific setting. So you might pick hand biting or you might pick screaming. You're not going to do that all day long. You're going to pick a particular setting. And the reason why you're going to pick a particular setting is I might bite my hand in speech therapy to get out of work. And I might bite my hand in groups to get attention. So I could do the same behavior to get different things in different settings. So what you want to do is first narrow it down to what's the behavior and what's the setting. So what you're going to have to discuss is, what do we want to work on first? What's the particular behavior and what's the particular setting? Now, one way to narrow this down if you have too many behaviors is to say, like I mentioned before, what's the most disruptive? Okay, what's causing the most problem? Give you an example. We walked into a school also in New York, and kids with the most severe emotional disturbances. So there were kids in there that had stabbed people. There were kids in there that had broken into homes, that had done everything. And so we asked them as a test, you know, what's the most severe problem, kid and problem you have right now? Let's focus on that one. And they all looked at each other and nodded, you know, it's Mary. Okay, what is she doing? She's cursing. Cursing? What are you talking about? You know, you've got people, stabbed people here. Why is cursing the most severe problem? They said, you don't understand. Cursing for her is life-threatening. I said, cursing is life-threatening? Because what happens is she walks around the neighborhood, she doesn't distinguish who she's talking to, and she curses them out. It's going to get her killed. Someone's going to kill her because she cursed someone's grandmother, and they're going to do something to her. So we're most afraid for her because of her cursing. And that's what you really want to look for, is at this level, what's the behavior that has the worst consequences? So pick a behavior, pick a setting. If you have multiple behaviors and multiple settings, think of ones that are most problematic. Why don't we give it a try? What you're going to find on the scale is a series of questions that have never, almost never, seldom, half the time, usually, almost always, always. Here's a couple of them. Would the behavior occur continuously over and over if this person was left alone for long periods of time? If you say never, then that's fine. If you say always, that's fine, or anything in the middle. Does the behavior occur following a request to perform a difficult task? Yes, always, or sometimes. You notice that we're not asking for specific numbers. Okay, so we don't say on this questionnaire, when we ask to perform a difficult task, it happens 5 times a week, or 5 times a day, or 5 times an hour, or 5 times a minute. The reason is that this is all relative to the person that you're working with. Bless you. It's relative to that person. So if they hit themselves once a week on average, but when I put them in a difficult task, it happens almost every single time, then that's almost always, or always. Okay, so it's relative to how often this person does it. Does the behavior occur in response to talking to other persons in the room? Does the behavior occur to get a toy, food, or activity that this person has been told that he or she can't have? Once you've done this, and again, we're going to talk about a half hour, maybe even a little less. At the end, there's a scoring sheet. You put the number associated with it. So question number 1, you might have put a 6. Question number 2, a 4. Write those answers in. Write the numbers in. What I'm going to ask for you is, you're going to have to do math now. You're going to take an average. How many questions? What's the total? And divide by how many questions are on here. Okay? We'll see how much time that takes you. This is a longer version that we normally have. See how long that takes you, and then we'll either talk about it now or we'll talk about it when we do intervention.